Hello, I'm Joe Sneve, Metro Watchdog reporter with Argus Leader Media, and I am joined today for a live discussion interview with Mayor Paul TenHaken. It's been 722 eventful days since you were sworn in.
Who's counting?
As the 32nd mayor of this great city. I want to kind of take a look back at what the last 2 years have brought. Obviously, it's been kind of a wild ride. There's been a lot of stuff that you've had to deal with. And obviously, right now we're dealing with the pandemic, so we'll talk a little bit about coronavirus too and the city's response to that. So thanks for coming. I know you're busy.
Yeah, you bet. No, I appreciate it. And as I said to you, before we started this, no questions are off limits. So let's go. Throw anything at me.
Well, when I think back to your first 2 years, I mean, I've covered you since before you were mayor. You inherited the parking ramp project from the Huther administration, which was kind of a hot button issue from the start. You've had, I think, right out of the gate, public input became kind of the first flare up. There was going to be some changes to public input, and then you guys found some compromise with the council on that. 5G has been a big deal. You've dealt with tornadoes, record flooding, and now a pandemic. I mean, when you think back to that, kind of what stands out as like your biggest challenge? Is this pandemic the hardest thing you've had to deal with?
Obviously the pandemic is like nothing else. I mean, we're all in this weird spot, whether you're working for a newspaper, whether you own a convenience store, whether you're in the construction industry. That's really turned everyone's life upside down. The weird thing about this pandemic, because we've had other disasters in these first couple of years in office, has been the pandemic is taking steps and taking precautions to prevent a disaster. And tornadoes and floods are more like, okay, a disaster happened, now how do we recover from that?
Right.
And so it's a way different type of response, because there will be people, when you're responding to a tornado, no one's really armchair quarterbacking that. They're like, yeah, we got to get these homes taken care of. Yeah, we got to get these businesses fixed. Yeah, we got to get the city. They all agree what the goal is. With the pandemic, not everyone agrees what the goal is. And so there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking on what steps we're taking or need to take as a result. So the pandemic has by far and away been the most challenging thing of my professional life that we've had to deal with. I'm sure all my leadership team in the city would echo that that's been hard as well. But I'll be honest with you, a close second is our parking ramp. You mentioned it. I want to make sure that project gets done and gets done in the right way, and that we restore public confidence in that project. And that hasn't been easy. So.
With the, I know people probably want to hear a lot about Corona, but since you say number 2 is parking ramp, one of the first kind of high-profile press conferences you had was you endorsed the developers on that.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't select the developers, but I think it was a month after you were sworn in, you came out and said you support these guys, you're going to work with them and do everything you can to make sure it's a successful project. I think it was last April or May, that was your deal with those guys were terminated. Knowing what's taken place since then, when you look back at your decision to endorse that group, Village River Group, in June or July of 2018, would you have done the same thing?
You have to, like I said, a couple minutes ago, you have to give the public confidence in the steps you're taking in city government and be transparent as possible. So standing up and saying, listen, we have a contract with this group. Okay, I have no reason not to believe that this is going to be a great partnership. I stand behind it, and we're going to try and make it successful and do whatever we can to get it to come up with a great project. So I don't think I would do anything different in that situation because the facts were the facts, the contract was the contract, the project was the project, and we're committed to making it successful. The thing I've taken away from that whole project overall, though, is less about a ramp and more about my time in office and how do you set up the office for people who come after you, right? And what sort of situations do you want to pass on to future administrations, to future leaders, and making sure they're set up for success. And And some of that is, the last 3, 4, 6 months of a term, you have to realize your goal is not to push things through as quick as possible. It's almost to wind down and get the house ready for the next person who's going to move in. And so that's something I want to be sure that I do in my time in this chair is make sure that I'm setting it up well so that the next person can come in and inherits a great clean house and all the furniture is in order.
So you think Huther could have done a little bit better job of that? I mean, he had a lot of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings and stuff. I mean, we wrote about how much he packed into the last couple months, so you would take a different approach than that.
Well, maybe, I think it's tough because I know there was a lot of great projects that Mayor Huther got done and that Mayor Huther wanted to get done, and we wouldn't have a Premier Center, we wouldn't have an aquatic center, we wouldn't have the rail yard project when the rail yard moved, and so a lot of those things were done and done well. And so I think it's very important when you have large scale projects that are large investments for the taxpayer, making sure there is a high level of buy-in from the community when you move forward with those is very critical. And for me, if I don't feel like I'm getting the full support of the community on something, it really makes me pause and step back and say, okay, even though I maybe think this is right, and maybe it is right, if the community's not coming along with me on this, it's going to be a fight the whole time. Right. And those are the questions you have to ask.
Okay. On Corona, you said it's obviously the most challenging time for you professionally, but personally, what has this been like? I mean, has this taken a toll on your personal life, your family time, things like that? I mean, how's that gone?
Well, here's the thing about the whole COVID environment right now. I don't have ribbon cuttings to go to. I don't have galas to attend. I don't have Saturday night fundraisers to go to, for the Humane Society. I mean, all those things are off. So while I'm grinding it during the day, I'm home on the weekends and I'm home in the evenings. Now I'm physically home. I don't know if I'm always mentally home because phone keeps ringing, the texts keep coming in, the issues but I'm around my family, a fair amount. I'll say when I took office, I immediately started having back problems. And I have wrestled with lower back problems this entire 2 years I've been in office. Pretty substantial. I've done acupuncture, I've done epidurals, I've done several PTs, chiropractors, CT scans, MRIs. I cannot figure it out. And we keep going back. It's just stress. I have people carry their stress in different spots. I carry mine in my back. So you talk about the toll. Family's good. Physically, because I'm an active guy, I still like to get out and run. My back's been killing me for 2 years.
So you have to take a shorter run then on those days you get out?
I take shorter runs. I also do, I have percussion guns that help me with the therapy. I'm seeing a chiropractor more often. I'm just having to take care of myself physically more. I'm 42. I'm not a kid that can just go out and run 10 miles at a pop anymore.
Yeah. Time is undefeated, right? So
Father Time is playing some jokes on me right now. So,
well, in this, I think we're about 2 months into this pandemic, and since the city stood up its emergency operations center, can you think of the one instance or decision you've had to make throughout this pandemic in the city that the most difficult thing you've had to do or consider?
Hands down, it was. When I felt, and my team felt, based on the data and the spikes and the projection we were seeing, that we need to consider a stay-at-home order. I asked the governor to consider doing that for our counties from an executive level. She said no. I pushed for it. As the data evolved from first reading to second reading, realized it was not the right decision. And having to pull back on that pulling back is easy. Having to bring that forward when, quite honestly, I knew how damaging and tough that would be, super hard. In the end, I think the governor's position was the right position. My position to do that was the wrong position. And if there's one thing that I hope people take away from me as a leader, it's that as the facts come out, I'm willing to adjust my position. I'm not just dug in on something because I originally put my flag in the sand on an issue. And so we've had to do that throughout this response, is look, adjust, reassess, realign what we're doing. But that potential stay-at-home order, well, 90% of the country was under one. Trying to do that in Sioux Falls, there was not an appetite at all for that. And I think there was almost a window, Joe, in the country when that was okay to do, because people were like, yeah, do it. Well, it's whatever we can do. Well, that window closed pretty quickly, and we were on the tail end of that. And I'm kind of glad, because now, based on the data that we saw, I don't think we would have needed it and did need it. Because again, the whole time, our coronavirus response has been about healthcare capacity and making sure if people get COVID, that they're going to have a bed, that they're going to have a vent, that we have ICU beds available. That's what we've been watching. Mm-hmm. It's not preventing deaths, even though that's the goal of that. But people will continue to get sick from COVID. We will continue to see deaths from COVID. That's a reality of the virus. And until there's a vaccine and until there's treatment options available, that's going to be the reality we're going to live in for a while.
Do you think the general public understands the healthcare capacity as far as that being the goal?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, when there's a death that we report, I get emails to my office and say, Mayor, you could have prevented this. And it's like, well, I don't know if I can prevent an 82-year-old gentleman who contracts COVID and passes away from it, and contracted it in a facility somewhere. I mean, I'm not sure what role we could play, the government could play, in fixing that issue. And so where it would be my issue is if our healthcare systems said, Paul, we cannot handle a single patient. We're at capacity. And I don't do anything to help alleviate that capacity, and people don't get ventilators, and they don't get ICU beds, and they don't get the care they needed, then those deaths and those situations, those are things that we'd have to be accountable for.
Smithfield's been the source of, I think the majority, if not close to the majority of the cases in the county. Could government, whether state or city, have done anything to prevent that?
I get asked that question a lot. I know the governor's got asked that question. It's very hard to see what steps the government could have done to prevent that hotspot. As a critical infrastructure business, Smithfield didn't have cases, in their facility for 90 days. Or for 60 days. This came out of a light socket at them, like it has a lot of other businesses. And quite honestly, Smithfield has done a lot of things right in their response. They have gotten vilified a little bit. Their employees have gotten vilified. I've seen signs in the community, if you work for Smithfield, please don't come in our business, which is embarrassing. I hate seeing that. And so I've been trying really hard to say this isn't about Smithfield. Or Good Sam or any employer. It's about coronavirus and the nature of packing plants with that many people working that close in an environment where there's a lot of moisture in the air, and it's ripe for the spread of coronavirus. Yeah. So I don't think so. I don't think the government could have done a whole lot to prevent that, and especially when there's spread happening in the plant, but there's also a lot of spread happening outside the plant that Smithfield or the government can't control in people's day-to-day lives.
Tomorrow, the City Council is going to scheduled to take a second final vote on recommendations coming out of your office to ease restrictions on bars, restaurants, and other basically for public interfacing businesses in town, like movie theaters, bowling alleys. There's some nuance to how those rules apply depending on business type. I want to focus in on restaurants and bars, which essentially don't have a cap on the number of people that they can be allowed in.
Right.
But for the viewers' benefit, I'll just explain what the proposal does. They can have as many folks in their restaurants and bars as they want, so long as the tables, the groups, which can't be larger than 6 adults, are social distancing 6 feet apart from
Correct.
each other. That's the directive, if it passes, that these businesses are getting from the city. Is there anything beyond that, though, that you want to see from bars and restaurants. Do you think waiters and waitresses should be wearing masks? And how? I think it came up at a meeting, and there wasn't a clear answer of how should bars deal with folks that might be coming up to the bar to ask for a drink and things like that. What's your guidance?
Oh,
there?
it's tough, man, because this is the nanny state that we've fallen into, where you talk about masks. Masks have become one of the most divisive things in our country now, and a gentleman at a dollar store I just saw this morning, he got shot because the security guard asked for his daughter to put a mask on before they came in the store. I would say the market's going to dictate that. If people go into a bar and they say, listen, I feel more comfortable if my server wore a mask, and they said that to the management's going to have to figure, okay, if this is what our patrons are asking for, then we need to abide by this. They can also require it. Costco say, listen, to come into Costco, you got to wear a mask. So XYZ bar could say, all of our employees will wear masks. Mm-hmm. And some people will go to that venue because of that fact. Some will not go to that venue because of that fact. They're kind of the American, I don't have to wear a mask. I don't want to wear a mask. It's my right. It's great. Then you don't have to go to that place. Right. So it's somewhat divisive, and you talk about there's some squishy parts of this ordinance. Yeah, if there's a group of 6 people and you see your pals and you start going and you stand and walk over and pull up a chair and talk to them, well, now you're a group of 7. So you're technically not in compliance with the ordinance. Is that going to be enforced? Someone going to call the cops? And the cop, probably not, Joe. We're going to rely on the businesses to help enforce a safe environment within their establishment.
Will you have inspectors out with tape measures coming in?
We'll not probably have inspectors out with tape measures, but when they open up, we have a program called our SOAR program. And the SOAR team is there for a business when they're ready to open to call our SOAR team and say, hey, can you come in, check out our setup, let us know if you think we're in compliance and if anything has to change. And so we can come in and probably with tape measures say, you probably want to move this around a little bit. So we're here to help. We're not here to be like the disciplinarian of this. And this is really kind of what we call permissive legislation a little bit, where we're allowing businesses to open and do this. Some still maybe don't want to open. Some businesses, I'll pick on some hair salons, some still don't want to open. They've never had to close this whole time, but they still just don't feel safe opening. And that's okay. That's their prerogative as a business owner in the United States of America. You can choose whether or not you want to open.
Yeah, it doesn't mandate anybody open. It doesn't mandate anybody at risk or vulnerable go out.
Right.
So
that's been my response all along is what's best for you as an individual? What's your personal responsibility? If I have a child at home that's somewhat immunocompromised, maybe has asthma, something like that, I'm going to be probably extra cautious, and I'm not going to go out to eat. I'm not going to go to these situations. If you're a 21-year-old single person and you and your party of 3 want to go out and have a couple drinks, well, that's a decision you can make for yourself, and you can go out and do that. So personal accountability, personal responsibility, it's also what I think has gotten us to this point where we've flattened the curve pretty substantially in this region, because I think people have made the decisions that have been right, not only for themselves, but the people around them.
Nothing's going to snap back to normal anytime soon, as far as anybody knows. I don't think anybody knows how long it will be until life gets back to where it was in February. What do you envision as far as long-term consequences for the city, whether it comes to revenues, things like that, or large-scale, or maybe just high-profile projects that were on the horizon? I think before you came in, you said Chick-fil-A is still
Chick-fil-A's still coming.
Still coming. And then, yesterday we saw Rail Yard Flats, groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. So that's positive to see that that's still on track. What are your thoughts on what kind of road we're facing here?
Well, Sioux Falls went into this pandemic in a pretty strong financial position, so we're going to be better situated to come out of it than some cities and even states that came into the pandemic nearly bankrupt, and this is going to tank them. Our recovery, I'm very bullish on the fact we're going to have a strong recovery here. There are, however, going to be consequences for the taxpayers on the type of services we can provide as a city, because we got to remember, when bars and restaurants and retailers have declining revenues or no revenues, that's where we get our revenue. And so our ability to put new parks in, to repave roads, to open up pools, to put in ski lifts, at Great Bear, I mean, all those projects become question marks. So we just announced sales tax numbers for April. They're down about 2.6%. Okay, so a decline, but and that's year over year, April over April, where we thought they'd be. But we are going to continue to see that level of decline. And when you talk about a $550 million budget, it only takes a couple percentage points of decline over a sustained period of time where you're talking about multi-million-dollar projects we got to start looking at. Right. So the core services of government, infrastructure, public safety, those things are not going to go away. Your toilets will flush, your water's going to work. We will continue to staff up our law enforcement and our fire rescue and those things. But some of those quality of life things, those services, we're going to have to take a hard look at.
Like a downtown ice rink that I know 6 months ago, I think I wrote about that coming out of the Parks Master Plan. Maybe it wasn't quite that long ago, but that's probably going to have to pause.
I'll give you a real example. The Midco Aquatic Center, which is a great building, great facility, serves our community great, but that doesn't cash flow. Pools don't make us money. So we operate about $600,000 to $700,000 in the red on that, so that taxpayers, we subsidize as a city to keep that open. That has the potential to be about twice that much if we open it now. Wow. And so can we afford to open the Midco? Will the Midco open yet this year? Those are questions we're asking right now and say, okay, if we do, are we willing to continue to take this loss to operate an indoor pool, or is the road from 57th Street from Western to Minnesota, is that project more important than an indoor pool? And then the big question in all that is equity, meaning how do you provide services that are equitable to the entire community, so that some people, pools are all they have, or parks are all that is what they do socially, because they can't afford to have passes to the zoo and to go to movies. And so we need to make sure that we maintain those services for the entirety of the community, and making sure that we have an equitable community with what we're offering.
You got 2 years to go here, God willing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably too early to think about, but I'm going to ask, are you going to run? Do you want a second term?
Well, you're right, it is too early, and I'll tell you, the last couple months have been really hard, and it has been. It's hard on my family, it's hard on me personally. Joe, the political environment in 2020 is not a fun one. And I'm not a great politician. I don't like politics. I like serving, I like this job, but I don't like the politics to go along with it. I'm not very good at it. I'm not a very good politician. What you see is what you get. Sometimes I say the wrong things that don't cater to a party or cater to a special interest group, but I'm a small business entrepreneur by background, and I was looking at telling people to stay at home and not go to businesses. And people are like, who is this guy? I thought he fit in this lane or this lane. I really am just trying to do what's best for the city. And so would I like to rerun? I think so, but these first 2 years have been a grind. And I'd also be lying if I said I didn't miss the private sector. I miss running my business, my company, which I still call it my company. It's not anymore. I sold the whole thing, and I don't have any equity in that. But I'd love to be back in the private sector someday. I'd love to help grow a company and do that work. And I know I will be back in the private sector someday. I'm not a career politician. This is not my goal isn't to be in politics forever.
No trip to Washington or Pier for you?
You know what? When you have kids my age, I get to sleep in my own bed every night in the greatest city in the world. I get to see my kids every day. It's hard to do that if you're serving in D.C. It's also hard to live in the greatest city when their capital's in Pier. And I love Sioux Falls. And I'm doing this because I love Sioux Falls.
Well, I appreciate the time. I know you're super busy and you're a man in high demand right now. Between, I think we have 3 council meetings a week now. It's these special meetings and regular meetings. I know you do a lot of media. Try to keep the conversation open with the public. So I appreciate you taking the time here, and I look forward to covering you for the next 2 years.
Well, honestly, and this isn't just a bootlicking moment, but I do appreciate the media's role right now, because the media has been critical in keeping our public informed. And I can do a press conference twice a day, but if there's no cameras or reporters there to cover it, no one gets the word out. So people need to continue to support our media outlets. You know, your content isn't free, you know, and so whether that means paying for content, subscribing for content, advertising with our local media is really, really important. Just like we support local businesses, supporting our local media is important too. So I appreciate you guys.
Well, thanks. We could always use the plug.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. We'll be Argus Leader will continue to be covering all things city government and coronavirus related. You can watch my Twitter feed this evening, Argus_Joe, for live tweets from tonight's council meeting, as well as tomorrow's special city council meeting, where the eased restrictions will be considered and voted upon. That meeting's at 10:30 a.m. So we got a day game after a night game, which I didn't get to vote on, but I'll be there. So.